Welcome to 412 Sports Talk, the number one podcast for Pittsburgh sports. Steelers, we talk it. Penguins, we talk it. Pirates, yeah, we talk it. With the biggest guests.
Bob Pompiani, Pittsburgh legend. Mayor Bill Peduto, the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, is on with us. Doran Dickerson, West Allegheny legend.
Trey Essex, welcome.
Available on iTunes and Spotify. Hosted by Mad Chad Nolan.
It over too much. Well, now he's not turning it over at all.
And Eddie Provident.
We've got the best team in football.
And now, 412 Sports Talk.
All right, welcome to another episode of the 412 Sports Talk podcast, brought to you by MCM Studios and our main man, Mike Hitt. I'm your host, Eddie Provident, and with me is Chad Nolan and our very special guest, one of the legends of Pittsburgh hockey media, Pittsburgh hockey anything, really. The man, the myth, the legend, Bob Grove. Bob Grove, thank you for joining us. This is exciting because I've heard your voice on the radio probably since I was a little kid going to games with my dad. So, I mean, this is exciting for me, man. Thanks for joining us.
Well, Chad and Eddie, thanks so much for asking me to be on, and I appreciate the kind words. It's great to join you tonight.
Yeah, it's always awesome for us to be able to have people. We had Steve Mears on, and that was big for us. To, guys that we when we think of the Pittsburgh Penguins growing up watching watching the team, to have people on that we resonate with the team is awesome for us. I want to ask you, how does it feel to have what I would consider one of the coolest jobs, and a job that so many people are probably jealous of? Like, how I was reading, articles about how you came to be in the Post-Gazette and like all this stuff. Do you ever just think back and reflect? Mike Lang would probably be someone else that I would ask that same question to. Do you ever just like look back and think about your legacy and what you've done and how cool of a job you have?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think at all about my legacy. I'm grateful to have been able to cover hockey, for 17 years at the Observer down in Washington, PA, and that's where I got my start coming out of college. Mm-hmm. And grateful for the Penguins Radio Network to give me 15 years of work in there. It was, that radio gig was absolutely amazing for me. I mean, I grew up listening to the Penguins more than watching them on TV, because all the games, there weren't that many games on TV.
Right.
So my lifeline to the team when I was a kid growing up was the radio. And I used to listen to a lot of other teams, not just the Penguins broadcasts. I loved listening to hockey games on the radio. And I can remember seriously sitting there a half hour before Mike Lang's first broadcast in 1974, because it was exciting knowing there was a new play-by-play guy coming into town for this. I can remember sitting in my basement wondering, what everybody's going to sound like, what's it going to be like. It was a big deal for me. And then one day to be on the same broadcast team with Mike Lang, to be in the booth with Mike Lang was an unbelievable thrill. And still, it's amazing to me that it happened to this day. Well, I was so grateful for that opportunity, and I had so much fun.
That's awesome.
Bob, one of the things I always like to ask people is how they got into the sport of hockey and how they fell in love with hockey. Like, I know for my dad, growing up in the 70s, 60s and 70s, one of his buddies' dad worked at the arena and used to bring home like all the old equipment, like all the old sticks. So they started playing street hockey with all the old Penguins equipment. And that's how he felt. And then he started watching the game, started listening to it on the radio, got to go to a few games. How did you come to be a Penguins fan and a hockey fan? Like, what did it for you? Well,
I'll tell you what, it was kind of by accident, actually. I can remember being at my grandmother's house and watching the sports news one night, and they showed highlights of the 1970 series. The Pens and the Seals had played the night before, and they were showing some highlights the next day of the game. And at that time, I was a huge baseball fan. Mm-hmm. It was all about baseball for me at that point. I was like 10 and a half, 11. So, and I remember seeing it on the TV, and I thought, wow, that looks really cool. Look how fast those guys are skating, right? And so that's when I planted the seed, that, hey, I want to go to a game next year. That next Christmas, that was a Christmas present that my parents got me, was 2 tickets to Pens and the Bruins, December 26th, 1970. And so that was my first game. The Penguins beat the Bruins that night 4-2. I got to see Bobby Orr in my first game. And, you know, as many hockey fans will tell you, when you go to the rink for the very first time and you see that expanse of ice and you see the speed and you see the beauty of the game, I mean, that changed it all for me. And from that day on, baseball started to slip away as my favorite sport, and hockey began to take its place.
For me, I remember my first game. It was the '95 playoffs against the Washington Capitals. My dad got comp tickets through work, and I'd always seen Mario and Yager and Francis, on TV, but I'd never seen them live. And I remember seeing Lemieux skate onto the ice for the first time, and I think I was 6 years old. But man, that instant, like it like cemented it in me, from that point on. That was cool, man.
Yeah. There's for a lot of hockey fans, there's a lot of magic around that first game you see.
Yep.
Oh, for sure. Bringing to the current team, huge win last night. And I think the most important part of last night was how Tristan Jarry responded. I thought he played great. It was definitely needed because I definitely was not happy, and I'm sure he wasn't happy with his performance in game one. And I thought he was great last night. And I was worried because I've seen that story before where they came out hot, and then as the game went on, they weren't putting it away and really relied on him. Where are you at as far as your confidence goes in Tristan Jarry? Where do you think the team's confidence is with him, and how important was that performance by him last night?
Well, it was a huge performance for him, for the team and for him. And I kind of felt he was going to have a really, really strong game. And we heard the Penguins and we heard Mike Sullivan talking about that afterwards. I think I don't think that the team has any doubt about his capability. Where I'm at, I feel pretty good about Tristan Jarry, to be honest with you. I mean, I say that because I look at the body of work that he did this year. And I look at the way he started the season, which, he finally got to be a number one in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. And he came out of the gate, and he did not come out very strong.
No, he didn't.
And so one of the things you want to see from a player is how does he react when things go bad? And this is not just goalies; it's any player. What happens when things go south? You're in the best league in the world. If you're going to cut it in this league, you've got to learn from your mistakes. You've got to learn to have an even keel and be a professional about making sure that you come back out and have good performance. So look what he did after he got his game turned around. He was a big reason why the Penguins had the second half they had. And so I felt like when I looked at game one, I said, this is the same kind of situation. He comes into the playoffs, first game. It's pretty bad. And I think he'll be strong coming out. So I feel pretty good about Tristan Jarry and what he can give the Penguins in the playoffs.
What about the fourth line? What are you seeing from that fourth line that is giving them the success that they're having? And I think the biggest thing that I saw from them last night was, that first power play we just couldn't get anything rolling on the first power play. And Sullivan sends the fourth line over the board, and they immediately change the tide of that second period, and they immediately gain momentum for the team. What's your thoughts on the fourth line, and what are you seeing in particular from them that is giving them the success that they're having?
Well, I will say that I think through the first two games, the storyline of how well that line has played is that storyline is, I don't think, getting as much attention as it should be. It's getting some, but look, these are the guys who are playing against Barzal's line. Mm-hmm. Probably more than anybody, and one of the subplots of the series for me is the most creative. This Islander team has trouble scoring goals. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. The most creative guys they have are on the Barzal line, he and Eberle, and they've been shut down in the first two
completely.
Games. And these guys have played a big role in it. So what do I see? Why? Look, as soon as you get Tanev out there with them, you remember that we've seen Aston Reese and Bluger play with other guys, but it's totally different when you get Tanev out there. So the physicality that Tanev brings is playing a big role. You can see that their chemistry instantly is back in place, because it seems like forever since Tanev's been back has been out of the lineup. And so to see him back there and see the way those guys are playing. So I attribute their success to the chemistry that they have, the understanding, the confidence they have in each other, and Tanev specifically on the physicality part. And I think Bluger's been really good. He's been great in the circle the first 2 games, and I think he's been really good at anchoring what they're trying to do defensively against Barzal's line.
One thing that I think, is obvious right now, the power play definitely could use a spark, and a guy that I'm just foaming to try to get back in the lineup of the mouth is Evgeny Malkin. And I've seen a lot of what we call hot takes as far as this team doesn't need Gino, which I find ridiculous. And I've seen some really anti Malkin rhetoric out there, which really surprises me, given how great of a player he's been for the Penguins. But will we see Gino in this series, and how important is it for that locker room to get him back out there?
Well, I think you will see him in this series. I'm not sure it's going to be in Game 3 because I'll be honest with you, and that's not. I mean, I'm just taking a guess here, but sure. I mean, he traveled with the team, but I think they're going to want him there anyways because they want to keep monitoring him as it comes back. But I don't think there's anything huge about him traveling. For me, it doesn't mean he's going to play.
Right.
I also got to say, honestly, every game the Penguins win, when he's out of the lineup, takes the pressure a little bit off them getting him back as soon as possible. Like the most important thing for having him back, he's got to have confidence that he's ready to go.
Right.
Which he obviously does not. So if he's not feeling comfortable about it, then leave him out until he does feel comfortable about it. As far as the rhetoric about him let's face it, that's always been said by a certain segment of the fan base.
Yes.
I mean, it's ridiculous. The guy's a Hall of Famer. And so, you need him. If the Penguins are going to make a deep run in the playoffs, they're going to need Evgeny Malkin. Yep. It's as simple as that. Okay. You can't look at the 23 games he missed this season and say, well, there's the proof they can win without him. Half those games, seriously, almost half those games were against the Devils in Buffalo.
Right. And it's such a small stand, and they've won without Crosby before. Does that mean that does that mean that they prefer it that way? No, it's there's a lot of factors in that stuff.
But does he bring a completely different element to the power play? Yes. And, I think it'll be a big point of the power play getting back to where it needs to go. Because right now it's a train wreck. Last night they lost. Sid's struggled a bit on faceoffs on the power play. They lost them. They had 2 last night. They lost them both. They looked disorganized. Letang last night really struggled to get his shots through from the point. This was really the whole game, especially on the power plays. They didn't look organized to me. And I'm going to also give some of the reason for that is the simple fact that down the stretch of this regular season, the Islanders' penalty kill was spectacular. It was something like 92%. I want to say the last almost 20 games. They're aggressive. They're aggressive up the ice. They're aggressive in the zone against your power play. And if you aren't on top of your game, making quick passes, reading plays the right way, getting off your shots in a hurry, you're going to struggle against them. And outside of the very first power play in this series, that's exactly what the Penguins have done. They've struggled.
And the one thing about that very first power play of the series, even when we controlled the puck that whole time in the zone, they were clogging the shooting lanes up constantly. I mean, the Penguins were controlling the puck, I think, a lot of the time because they were passing it around trying to get an open lane so much. They did a good job of keeping the puck in the zone too when they did get their shots. But I mean, that's one thing, and I think it's just maybe it's a Barry Trotz thing where, because I remember the Capitals being very similar when Trotz was coaching them, that their discipline on the penalty kill as far as their lanes go. It is really, really good. And it's tough to deal with if you don't have your power play clicking at 100% with everybody healthy.
No, I completely agree. They do. They clog the shooting lanes, and look, they force you to make quick plays. Yep. And if you're in a spot, if you're in a spot with your power play where things just aren't going well, it's that plays right into their strength.
Yep.
Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, but it's lingering because the last 2 postseasons, and 3 postseasons in a row they failed to make the conference final, but 2 years in a row they lost in the first round. How important is this series? Do you feel like, as far as the coaching staff goes and maybe some of the core players in this team? I mean, if this series were to go South, which I don't think it will. I think they're the better team, and I think they'll prevail. But anything can happen in these playoffs. If they were to flame out again in the first round, especially now that they have a new front office, a new GM and a new director of hockey operations, I mean, would you expect huge changes? Would you expect this team this organization to really, take a look at a lot of the key players and key elements and maybe make some changes? Where are you at on that?
Well, I think we need to know more about the way Ron Hextall feels about his club. But I mean, because when I think about him in his current role right now, I see a guy who's trying to get the most out of the group he has, but he's actually right now he's thinking of being more in 5 years. That's what I see. And so for him, I don't think, one series is going to, his focus is going to be 3-4 years and 5 years in the future, and it's not going to get changed by this particular series. For the ownership, which is trying to win a Stanley Cup, it's a different call.
Right.
So now you're like, what is that relationship between the ownership and Hextall? Hextall's already said, look, this is going to be a big summer where they've got 1 year left for Letang, 1 year left for Malkin. So it's time. If you're going to offer him an extension, right, it's going to come now. And if you're not going to offer an extension, then what happens next? And we also know that ownership has been pretty clear to a lot of people who are close to the team and cover the team that they have no desire to see Letang and Malkin go anywhere but finish their career in Pittsburgh. So I that's my perspective is Letang and Gino are going nowhere, and that if they lose in the first round this year, I wonder how Hextall is going to feel about Sullivan. I think Sullivan's a terrific coach, but
I think he's one of the best coaches in the league.
Yeah. But I'm gonna look at the bottom line here. This would be 3 years in a row where you go out to a team that you shouldn't be losing to. So look, I wouldn't blame them, but I've been around a long time and I know the coaches take a lot of the blame when stuff goes south. So, but I'm like you, I don't want to talk too much about that because I don't see that happening in this series.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't see Letang or Gino going anywhere. I think they're going to retire Penguins as long as they want to. And I don't know. You're closer to the team. Do you think Crosby has any say in those kind of things? Like, does the ownership listen to him, or is that not really a thing with the Penguins?
Well, I would hope they do. I would hope they do. I don't think, Sid doesn't strike me as a guy who's, he's trying to be busy trying to run the club.
He's not LeBron James.
He's busy trying to do what he does on the ice. But I mean, he's too perceptive to not take his opinion on things. So I'm sure that they have some of those conversations with him. And what happens in the summer. Look, some of it's going to be maybe out of their hands. I'll give you an example, like Cody Ceci. So they bring him in for 1 year. He spent the last couple of years before that getting just ripped to shreds in Toronto, right? He's been awesome. He signed a 1 year deal for a little over $1 million. He's worth way more than that. I start thinking about the Nick Bonino days when it wasn't what the Penguins wanted to get rid of Nick Bonino. It was that Nick Bonino priced himself out for the following year. So I wonder that's one of my first questions. You got Joseph, waiting in the wings. You would assume that next year he's going to be a regular. I'm not sure about the future of Pettersson. He's struggling right now. I'm not sure he'll be here next season. We'll see. So there's, a lot of my questions immediately go to the defensive end of the roster. But it'll be an interesting summer for sure. Then, in the expansion draft, obviously, he's got to play. Hextall will play his cards right there. He's a smart guy.
Yeah. Who do you? Not to get too far into the offseason because we're still in the playoffs, but I do want to hit on something you talked about. The young guys like Joseph, and then we've got forwards like Nathan Legare and Sam Polian. Who leaves the lineup to bring these guys in? Does that happen next year, do you think, or is that still a year or two? Or is that another 2 years down the line?
Well, those two guys are still playing junior. So my personal feeling is it's guys like that, and they usually have to spend some time in the American League. But it'll be on them. I mean, they'll have camp next year, and they'll be you hope it's a regular season with a camp and exhibition games. And if they come in and they light it up, then maybe not, But I mean, let's not forget, Hextall's running the show. And how did Hextall handle Carter Hart? The way he handled Carter Hart probably cost him his job in Philadelphia. Well, I don't want to be that. It was a big factor.
Yeah.
In losing his job, because a lot of the people, I think, in ownership and others thought he misplayed his hand there and should have had Carter Hart up earlier than he was, and he stayed true to his belief. Hart needed some time in the minor leagues. So I would expect both of those guys to spend some time in the AHL next season.
Last one for me, Bob. And again, we appreciate you coming on here. Let's assume for a second. I know we shouldn't do that, but let's say the Penguins take care of business. They win this in 6 games, 5 games. I think 6 games where most people had it. Looking at this Boston-Washington series, if the Penguins win, who's the better matchup for the Penguins going in round 2? Because I actually think I would prefer playing Washington. I think Boston right now gives them a harder matchup, and every time they play Boston, I swear things go the wrong way.
Well, the Bruins are a bad matchup for the Penguins. I mean, look at the season series, look at recent seasons, look at their history against Tuukka Rask. I don't care what he's doing against anybody else, because I know a lot of Boston fans are not, they're unhappy with him. He has the Penguins' number. He plays great against them. They struggle against them. They struggle against the Bruins. They can't. A lot of nights they can't touch that top line. They can't stop them. The physicality that the Bruins bring throughout the lineup can be an issue for them at times. So I actually think the Capitals would be a better matchup. But the Capitals are a really great team. I mean, the only issue I have with the Capitals right now is I just wonder about the goaltenders. If Sonoff, got the start here in Game 3, and it looked really good early. Vanacek had a good year, but you can't get away from the fact these guys haven't played in the playoffs before, and how are they going to handle it when things get really rough? But I think, Capitals would look at the way the Penguins played against them in the regular season. I think the Capitals would be a good matchup for them.
And I was saying, I personally just want one. I want one more Caps Pens with a lot on the line before Crosby and Ovechkin are done. I don't think people realize that has been, to me, the marquee matchup for the NHL, and especially here in Pittsburgh. It's been so fun, honestly. I need one more. I need one more as a fan before those guys start, have their career start dwindling down.
Yep, no, I'm with you. I wouldn't mind seeing that.
So, Bob, my last question for you. I'm going to move away from the Penguins for a second, because I'm a hockey history buff, and I was going to ask you about who you thought the greatest team of all time was, but I actually want to focus in on this season. Where do you put what Connor McDavid did with 103 points on the season, or 105 points on the season, in a shortened season like this? And I think he missed a couple of games as well. Where do you put that as far as feats in NHL history? Being that it was only against the Canadian division, so some people are going to take going to knock him for that. I mean, I think it's one of the better individual seasons that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years at least. But what's your thoughts on that if you compare it to the rest of hockey history?
Well, I would agree with you. I mean, I would take a little bit of a shorter look at it. My personal feeling is that his achievement. Look, make sure I say this the right way. His achievement is amazing. Yeah. He's amazing. He's an amazing player. He's practically indefensible. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a guy play at that speed with those hands ever.
It's incredible, man. It really is.
He's amazing, and he's amazing. And I think he's getting. There's been a lot of talk about that, but my God, I mean, Mario. Forget about Gretzky. Mario put up more points in a shorter span of time than So I'm not going to put this at the top of any list like that. But I would go to what you said, which is, let's look back. The last 10, 15, 20 years. This has been an amazing season from him, and I'm not taking a single thing away from him. I mean, it's been bumpy out of the gate for him in Edmonton. If you think about his career now, what's he been here, 4 or 5 years?
Five, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It reminds me of what the Penguins went through with Mario. I mean, it took them 5 years to even get in the playoffs with Mario, and they spent 1 year where they came a game away from getting to the conference finals, and other than that, it's been a disaster. And that team's still not ready to win the Stanley Cup. They're not there yet. They're not going to win it this year. I don't know about next year, but this will be the thing for Connor McDavid is The question is no longer how good is this kid. He's amazing. What the question is going to be is, when is management going to give him the rest of the pieces they need? And then how many cups can he win? How can he lead this team to championships, not scoring titles, championships? That's where his career is going to start to be judged, but it is an absolute blast to watch him play.
I think that watching his career and how it's played out in Edmonton really should give Penguin fans an appreciation for not only Sidney Crosby and what he's done over his career, but how the team, how the organization, how Mario Lemieux and Burkle and Shiro and Rutherford, how they've all built a winning team and a winning organization
and committed to it committed to it,
because it doesn't happen often. And for us to come out of this with 3 Stanley Cups, look, like you said, Lemieux didn't even come out of it with 3 Stanley Cups as a player. So what we've seen in this in the Sid era, the Sid and Gino era, I really think that we need to appreciate it, because once this is done and over with, I mean, we could, be glass half full kind of people, but we're lucky. We're very lucky to see what we're seeing in Pittsburgh right now.
No, absolutely, that's true. And it seems to me I hear more and more people say that, and I'm glad to hear them say that, because I'm like you. I've been around long enough to know that sports are cyclical, and the day will come when you're not in the playoffs anymore. Yeah. Okay, it's just, I don't have to, for some generation of fans, they'll be like, what? It's going to happen.
I remember Rico Fata and Dick Tarnstrom and
exactly. But to your point, you have to have a committed ownership. You have to have an ownership with deep pockets that's committed to making sure they do everything to pave the way for the players to be the best they can be. And the ownership here is amazing. And part of the reason the ownership can do these things, let's get tip of the cap to the fans. Because they keep buying the tickets and they keep following the teams. And the support this team has had has enabled the ownership.
Oh, that crowd in game 2, man, that's the loudest. And that was only a half empty arena. And that's the loudest I've heard PPG in quite some time.
Yeah. So, hockey fans in Pittsburgh, be proud of the way you've supported your team, because it has allowed the ownership to do the things you guys are talking about.
Absolutely.
Well, Bob, again, we thank you so much.
Definitely.
For us, this is a special one. Like I said, I remember listening to you with my dad on the way to games, and getting those pre-games in, man. Like it's pretty cool, man. And we know you're a busy guy, so we appreciate you carving out some time for us.
Well, hey, again, thank you so much for thinking of me. It's been great to be on with you. Appreciate the kind words, and let's hope the Pens get to the next round here.
Yes,
definitely.
Sir.
Thanks again, Bob.
All right.
We'll be right back after this. Hey, 412 Sports Talk family, what's going on? It's your guy Eddie P. I'm sitting in MCM Studios right now with our sponsor, my man Mike Hitt. Mike, what's going on, brother?
What's up, bro? 412 Sports Talk Podcast, Pittsburgh, PA. What is up?
What we're doing is, we're a local podcast. We talk Pittsburgh sports. We're completely supported by people that are either from Pittsburgh or have ties to Pittsburgh. And even our sponsor, MCM Studios, is over in Allentown, in the heart of the city of Pittsburgh. But I wanted to bring you into the studio so you could see what Mike's got going on, and you can see a little bit of, what happens behind the scenes here at MCM Studios. So, Mike, what are you working on right now, man?
I'm working with always a stable of talented artists. Whether they're from Pittsburgh, they come to Pittsburgh to come to MCM Studios, they move here from out of town, whatever the case may be, a young, old, guy, girl, pop, rock, reggae, R&B, trap music. I just work with a lot of guys that need the love and the attention and the direction in order to get their sound and their business together and their whole artistry, in a position that is the quality and the vision that they were looking for. I kind of just help them bring all that together. So they're like, oh, or I would have been lost for the next 3 years if you wouldn't have said, hey, go do this, or sing your song like this, or write a song like this, or this is a good look for you as an artist. That's really what MCM Studios does, and what I have going on is just continually helping artists. If they get famous, they get famous. If they don't, they don't. But just helping them along on this artistic journey so they can look back and it was really it felt like it was worth it.
Yes. I know how much it means to be a musician and need that backup. And I'll be honest with you, Mike has been a big part of the business side of 412 Sports Talk and how much we've grown as a business too, helping us with the legal side of things, giving us all the tips that he's learned in 10, 11 years of business. So, like I said, I just wanted to get you guys to take a look at the studio, hear it from Mike himself, and just get a little bit of the behind the scenes of one of our sponsors, our first sponsor, MCM Studios. And you can check them out at 412mcmstudios.com. You can check them out on Facebook at MCM Studios Pittsburgh. Check Mike out on Twitter at Mike Hitman with 2 T's. Let's build this Pittsburgh community because there's a lot of cool people, a lot of talented people, and a lot of great things going on in the city. Mike, you got anything else to leave them with?
Support the people around you that are doing cool things. If you can see that they're serious and they're dedicated and they're putting the time and they're making the investment in themselves, at least make, at the very minimum, the investment of believing in them. That's what I did for 412 Sports Talk podcast. That's what I do at the studio with the artist. Just look at your life as one big investment, and I really think by doing that, we can all help bring everybody around us up.
So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this little mini tour. We'll be back with stuff like this. In the meantime, again, I'm Eddie Provident. From Mad Chad Nolan, from my man Mike Hitt. We'll catch you later.
Peace.
All right, well, welcome back to the 412 Sports Talk podcast, brought to you by MCM Studios. I'm your host, Eddie Provident. This is Mad Chad Nolan. And before we get any further, we just want to thank the legend, the Pens historian, Bob Grove, for coming on the show. We really appreciate him hanging out with us for a little bit. We know he's a busy guy. So, again, we really appreciate Bob Grove coming on to hang out with us. I want to switch gears here, Chad. I know that it's Penguins hockey, and I know that that's where everybody in the city of Pittsburgh has their laser focus right now. But I want to talk a little bit of football, and there's 2 things that I want to get into. One that you brought up earlier, one that kind of was bugging me. We'll go with your topic first, and that's Troy Polamalu choosing Dick LeBeau to induct him into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. What's your thoughts on that? And then I don't know, give me your thoughts on Troy Polamalu, like where he stands all time. Steelers history, and then maybe the generation of Pittsburgh athletes from 2000 to now, like these last 25 years or so. 25 years, where does he stand in your opinion?
Well, I mean, so it's going to be a little. So Troy Polamalu is probably my second favorite Steeler of all time. So there's going to be a lot of bias there. I am extremely biased. I've always been one of those guys when I see people say Ed Reed's the best safety of his generation, I'm like, no, it's Troy Polamalu. But it's hard to really compare because they played so different. I mean, they might as well have been playing a different sport, honestly. Like Ed Reed was your deep. He took away the midfield, and Troy Polamalu, I mean, you never knew where the hell he was going to go on a play because he had so much freedom. I enjoyed watching Troy Polamalu, as far as just enjoying an athlete, watching him play. I mean, Ben, Lemieux, Crosby, and Troy's right there as far as just my favorite athletes to watch play. I miss him. We're gonna look back at 2005 to 2014 with Ben, Troy, Hines, and all those guys. That's gonna be our golden age. The generation before us had the 70s Steelers. I have no emotional connection to the 70s Steelers. None. I wasn't alive. I wasn't even thought of at that point. My golden age is going to be pretty much around the time Ben got drafted. They won 2 rings, went to 3 Super Bowls, and Troy, to me, was his. It's going to be a hot take here, but I compared Troy really in terms of his importance to his time with the Steelers as Joe Green was to the 70s Steelers. And I look back and I'm like, what if they wouldn't have traded up to get Troy Polamalu in the 2003 draft? Him and Ben are and it was perfect because they were the cornerstones of the offense and the defense. And Dick LeBeau, when I think of Troy Polamalu, I do think of Dick LeBeau. And I think Dick LeBeau deserves credit for and so does Tomlin and Cowher for allowing Troy Polamalu to, they didn't box him in and say, listen, no, you have to play safety this way. And really when I look at Troy Polamalu, when you have an athlete like that can do so many different things and has the IQ that he has, we talked about this before with modern coaching. One problem I have with modern coaching is they try to make every player fit in the same hole as far as what they want. And what if the Steelers would have did that to Troy Polamalu, they would have hindered his success, because a lot of the great plays that he made by freelancing and being allowed to do. And Dick LeBeau and Tomlin and Cowher deserve a lot of credit with that. As far as where I would put Polamalu, as far as the Steelers go, again, it's hard to compare eras. Like, I can't compare Mel Blount and Troy Polamalu because, again, they played in such different. It might as well have been playing different sports. I think Troy Polamalu individually is the best Steeler of his era, even better than Ben. I think Troy was better at his position than any other Steeler that played in his era. I would probably put Ben number 2, but Ben doesn't have any All-Pros. Ben was never the Offensive Player of the Year. Troy Polamalu was the Defensive Player of the Year, was a perennial All-Pro and Pro Bowler, and people talk about Troy as one of the greatest safeties of all time. At the very worst, he's probably like, the 4th or 3rd best safety in most people's lists, but a lot of us would probably put him 1A, 1B with Ed Reed. So I think Troy Polamalu is the best Steeler of his era, and I would probably put him 3rd among Pittsburgh athletes behind Crosby and Malkin, as far as the best athletes of their era that played in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so for me, when you talk about all-time safeties, I think for me it starts with Steve Atwater. You got to put his name in there.
Ronnie Lott.
Ronnie Lott's name is going to be there. Troy Polamalu is right there with those 3. And I'm with you. I never liked the comparisons of Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu because I think they were 2 totally different types of football players.
Both great and both dynamic.
Yeah. Ed Reed was a ball hawk. There was no better ball hawk than Ed Reed. He was the guy that quarterbacks were terrified of because they knew that he was going to be there all the time. Troy Polamalu was the guy that running backs were probably terrified of. He was the guy that could time a snap count from the defensive secondary. There's I think it's probably it's probably famous now, but the interview between Pat McAfee and Ike Taylor, when Ike Taylor was explaining how Troy Polamalu would figure things out, and he just said that he was talking to Jesus, because he was a spiritual guy. And I mean, sometimes when you watch Troy Polamalu play, you have to think, man, is there a sixth sense there? Is there something going on that just he was tapped into? But he was that good. Like, he was that good of a football player. And I just don't think that comparing Ed Reed to Troy Polamalu is fair to either of the 2 of them because of how differently they played the game. As far as the question of where does he rank in this generation of Pittsburgh athlete, for me, it's Crosby number 1, and I think if you argue that,
no, he's number 1.
Yeah,
the only people that would argue that are people that don't like hockey. That's
exactly. Yeah. I would say I'll do it like this. I'll put a 2000s, so like just from 2000 on, this millennium,
that's kind of what I did. Yeah,
I'll do a Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
And for me, it's going to be Sid and Gino. Now this is where I'm going to lose you.
Oh boy.
It's going to be Sid, Gino, Troy, and McCutcheon, and here's why.
Oh man. Because
and Ben would be number 5, but here's why it's McCutcheon. Because for 4 years, the Pirates were relevant. And look at what this city did when the Pirates were relevant. He brought home an MVP. He took them to the playoffs. I've never experienced anything like I did when I saw that Reds Pirates playoff game on TV. And then as far as live games go, when I went to the Pirates Cubs wild card game, I don't know that I've ever experienced a sporting event quite like that in my life. And really the one that we have to thank for that is McCutcheon. And I'm fully aware that everybody that loves Big Ben is going to come at me now, and that's fine. And you guys are probably right. I just think that McCutcheon meant so much to this city and the baseball lovers of this city that he has to be in that conversation. But I could absolutely see the argument. Like I said, as far as Ben goes, I probably could, I would even concede that argument. Just personally, I would put, that's my 4 and my 5. It's, and if you want to split hairs on order outside of Crosby, go for it. But yeah, I think that Polamalu is number 3 on that list for me. I think behind Sid and Gino, just like you had him, I think I go Polamalu, and then McCutchen Ben, or Ben McCutchen, however you want to slice it.
My only argument with McCutchen versus Ben is so Ben's a
Ben did it way longer. He
Ben's
did it
right. So McCutchen did have I'm looking at his he did have a 5 or 3 year, actually a 4-year span where he was in the top 5 in MVP voting and won 1 MVP. Mm-hmm. So I'd say at McCutchen's peak, he probably was better at his sport than Ben was. But we have to look at longevity numbers, also all time where Ben's going to place all time as far as quarterbacks go. Trust me, Ben has the longer resume. He has the better argument. I just think that because the circumstances, the Pirates have sucked for as long as they have sucked. And McCutchen really was the one. He was the straw that stirred the drink. I will say also, so Ben, one of the most underrated performances in Pittsburgh sports lore is how good Ben was in the 2005 playoffs.
Yeah, I think that you're 100% right.
If they gave like the Conn Smythe in football, not the Super Bowl,
it would be Ben. It would be Ben.
And I look at McCutchen, and man, so in the 2013 he batted .278.
He struggled in the playoffs, yeah.
And yeah, I think if he would have had the signature MVP type performance in that playoff, that postseason, or any of these postseasons for that matter, I think maybe I would maybe give a better argument. But considering that he doesn't have the longevity and Ben has those 2, and again, you know me, I'm not a guy that like, oh, he has rings, but they won rings because Ben was, and I think even Ben's performance in the 2008 run was, he didn't have the stats, but if you go back and watch those games, the one thing he didn't do is he didn't make any mistakes. He had, I think he had 1 interception in 3 games, and it was a tip ball in the Super Bowl that didn't even lead to anything. So it was like harmless. But then like the Super Bowl game winning drive, I just, all that stuff to me, if we're talking Mount Rushmore again, I'll even concede maybe that McCutchen at his peak was better than Ben was at his peak. But I think if we're talking Mount Rushmore, I think Ben's importance is just a little bit more. But I'm not going to be one of these guys like, oh, I hate the Pirates because of this. McCutchen's definitely in the conversation. There's probably going to be people that listen to this show and agree with you.
Yeah, the way I look at it, as far as Ben's 05 playoff run goes, I think the reason why it was so big for him to have played the way he did was because everybody was expecting that team to come out and run the ball. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, in the first game against the Bengals, we came out slinging.
All 3 games. The Colts.
Yeah, the second game against the Colts.
Peyton Manning. He
came out slinging. He threw that. I remember him hitting a Heath Miller on a big pass. I remember him. So when Ben did that, it should have been Carson Palmer. It ended up being John Kitna, but against Peyton Manning and against even somebody, people forget that the quarterback for the Broncos that year was Jake Plummer.
Jake the Snake.
He wasn't a bad quarterback in his career. He was a solid quarterback.
And Denver had the number 2 defense that year.
Right. And so for Ben to come out against, big time names and do that, I think that really put him on the map. And yeah, everybody knows that he didn't have a great performance in the Super Bowl, but
it was bad actually.
Yeah, but he got them there. He got them there on his play in the previous 3 games. But yeah, so like I said, we kind of got off top. We kind of got on a tangent there. I actually think though that would be a really good Twitter question, like a Twitter poll question. Whose legacy means more to the city of Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger or Andrew McCutchen? I think you're going to see all the Ben haters come out on that one. And I think, the baseball lover, the sipping a North Shore Kool-Aid Pirate crowd. I think you'll see them come out on that. But I also think you'll see guys like you and Derek who swear by Ben. And I mean, hey, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback and he's probably, he's
There might-
got an argument for a top 10 QB of all time.
I bet you there's probably going to be some people that maybe will argue for Fleury, who I consider, if we did a show where, and not to get off topic, but he might even be in the overrated category for me. But I guarantee you people are going to say him. Also, Bettis and Hines Ward are probably going to get mentioned as well.
Yep. For me, Bettis split time in the 90s and the 2000s. So, you know, you kind of, that Hines Ward I definitely can see. But for me, it's Sid, it's Geno because of,
and Antonio Brown.
Yeah, and people are going to put Antonio Brown up there. I think Sid, Geno, and Polamalu though are the three locks. I would have to.
By the way, I'm going to ask Bob about this, man. There's been a lot of Evgeny Malkin hate. I think we should talk about that maybe another time. But I bet you there's going to be people that probably don't have Malkin on there, which is insane. So
yeah, but yeah, so that was the first thing I wanted to bring up. The second thing I wanted to bring up, sticking with football, is Pro Football Focus. I can't remember the dude's name. I think his last name was Trash, which is pretty on par for their product. But he had an article today and had a tweet today saying that Tyreek Hill may be the best deep threat in NFL history. I think that Randy Moss would have something to say about that. For sure. I think that you can go back into the 80s. Jerry Rice was the greatest receiver of all time, and you look at a lot of the deep balls that he caught and he was a part of. Somebody like a Chris Carter, who, he was more of a possession guy. Terrell Owens, who was a possession guy, but he got down the field quick. There's a lot of receivers that I think would have something to say about someone saying that Tyreek Hill is the greatest deep threat of all time. You brought up a name earlier, Antonio Brown. Look at Antonio Brown on deep balls, man. Look at Ben and Brown connecting on deep balls. What say you about Tyreek Hill being the greatest deep threat of all time?
As far as Tyreek Hill goes, again, to me, that's part of the problem with today and social media and all this stuff is the recency bias. Tyreek Hill is relevant right now, and half the people that would say that never watched Randy Moss in his prime. Randy Moss, to me, is the most talented player to ever play receiver, and I would argue he's probably one of the most talented NFL players of all time. Not the greatest. Jerry Rice has the greatest career. Jerry Rice is the Wayne Gretzky of the NFL to me, where he's just the greatest. He had the greatest all-around career, maybe even regardless of position. But if I'm throwing a ball down the field, everybody's in their prime, Randy Moss is, I don't even think it's close.
The man was 6'4" and ran a 4.3 40. What do you do against that?
So he only caught 70 or 60. Wow, nice. 69 passes his rookie year, 1998. And he only started 11 games, right? He played in 16, but he only started 11 games. Think about this. He caught 17 touchdown passes. Okay, of those 17, 12 of the 17 were over 30-yard touchdowns. My God. He averaged, 19 yards a reception. That was his rookie year. Then he had his next 2 seasons were like identical, 11 touchdowns and 15 touchdowns, averaging over 17 yards per reception. So he wasn't your guy that you were going to throw an 8-yard hitch to and get a first down. That was Chris Carter. But Randy Moss, and it's not like he played with, look at the quarterbacks he played with. Brad Johnson, Randall Cunningham was good. He was at the end of his career. Dante Culpepper. These are decent quarterbacks, but I don't think anybody's going to argue that he was playing with like nobody on Patrick Mahomes level. That's for sure. I would say Randy Moss hands down, and I'm not even sure Tyreek Hill is the best deep threat right now. I would say DK Metcalf has at least an argument to be made.
Yeah, DK Metcalf was the guy I was going to bring up, and even contemporaries like of Tyreek Hill. Look at Julio Jones. Look at AJ Green in his prime. We're talking like dudes that really could get down the field quick, and even for 1 or 2 years, I remember what Mike Wallace was doing with his speed, and what Ben just launching balls up to him. So Tyreek Hill is good. Don't get me wrong. He's a phenomenal receiver, and he is having Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback makes you even more of a threat. I get it. Completely understand it. But to say he's the best of all time, I could make a solid argument, like you said, with DK Metcalf, that he's not the best currently. And so, I think it's again, Pro Football Focus trying to get clickbait, trying to do their thing, trying to get clicks, trying to get likes, trying to get traffic. And they say outrageous, outlandish stuff to do that. So
yeah, and I love analytics. I love all this stuff. The biggest problem is, are these guys going to go back and watch every game of Randy Moss's career and then grade it and then compare it to Tyreek Hill? If not, then how can you really make that? How can you come out and say that? I would say go back to 1998 through 2002 and watch all of Randy Moss's games, and I think you'd probably be surprised. Like I said, Randy Moss, for all of his faults, and he was inconsistent at times, and there was times where like he even admitted like I don't feel like playing, and hey, those are character issues. But I'm just talking pure talent. To me, I think he was the most impressive, physically impressive football players I've really almost ever seen.
I mean, think of how spoiled we were to have him and Terrell Owens in the same era.
Yeah, and Chris Carter, honestly. Yeah, he doesn't get enough. You know who else was underrated? Tim Brown.
Tim Brown was another one. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
we were pretty spoiled as far as the receiver position goes in football. These last 2 decades or so, seeing the guys that we saw play the game. And look, Tyreek Hill is one of the young guys that are up and that we're gonna enjoy watching. Like I would tell people, like, this isn't a hate on Tyreek Hill fest. This is, enjoy Tyreek Hill while he's in his prime, because you don't get to see athletes like this. You don't get to see athletes like this all the time. It's something special, and that's again. I remember what we were talking about. When Edelman retired, we were, people,
yeah.
And we had to go through this whole thing. Is Edelman is he a Hall of Famer or not? Because people kept elevating him to Hall of Famer status. And so you have to talk bad about the guy to explain to people, no, he's not a Hall of Famer. It's the same situation right now with Tyreek Hill. I don't want to talk bad about Tyreek Hill because he's a really good, one of the top 5 receivers in football. But if you're going to call him the best deep threat ever, well, I have to talk bad about him because I have to explain to you that there's 4 or 5 guys that are at least that are ahead of him in that argument. And it's not even close. And like you said, Randy Moss I don't understand how if you're going to talk about deep threat wide receivers, I don't understand how Randy Moss isn't your number one. I think the conversation starts and ends with Randy Moss. But I mean, what do I know? I'm sitting in my basement, on a podcast. I'm a fake media guy, as some people would say. But yeah, I think that's it for this. We're gonna go ahead and take a break. And this is the end of the show. I'm so used to doing this the opposite way around. So yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in this week. Again, we want to thank Bob Grove. We want to thank MCM Studios and our main man, Mike Hitt. All the people who make this happen. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to 412 Sports Talk. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you like the show, leave us a review, and be sure to tell a friend about your source for all things Pittsburgh sports. Find us on Twitter at MadChad412 and at Eddie_P_412.